I'm Sarah Jessica Leivers. I'm here from the BBC. I work in the Voice and AI department as a software engineer, and I'm going to talk with you today about talking with machines. And also, thank you for coming, because I was asked to fill in sort of like last minute, and this wasn't in the printed programme, so well done for finding it. So that's really good. It's an encouraging start that people actually turned up. Cool. Right, so I was told today it's going to be quite a general audience of women in tech and some other supportive people as well. So I thought I'd start off by sharing my journey, and that kind of fitted in with what was spoken about at the keynotes at the beginning as well. Because I definitely had a rather unconventional, wavy journey into software engineering. So my journey into tech, I have to say my home influences are still the biggest influences throughout my whole life, right into my adult years. And I was very fortunate in that we had a computer at home at a very young age. My dad, who's a mechanical engineer, was very interested in computing, and he was very influential. Because of his interest, we had an internet connection at home before most people had an internet connection. And I remember it used to be very expensive to dial up, so I had to write my emails offline, connect, then quickly send them. And also, due to my dad's interest, I was fortunate enough to have books around the house on these topics as well, before they were sort of widely available in the libraries. Also, there were some influences at school that kind of went the other way, unfortunately. I used to use the computer labs most lunchtimes when I was in my teenage years. That's something my peer group and I did. However, the IT lessons were basically Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel, and they were really quite boring, to be honest. And a lot of the stuff I'd already learnt at home. So I wasn't really encouraged to take IT any further. When it came to choosing options at age 14, I couldn't take everything I was interested in for GCSE, so IT definitely lost its priority. I took music instead, since my parents were paying a lot of money to send me to piano lessons, and I felt kind of obliged to let my parents see some money's worth out of them. So yeah, I went regularly for these music lessons, and I remember talking one evening to my piano teacher about my options and things I might want to do in the future. And she said to me, now everyone's going into IT and they're going to be worth 10 a penny. And I remember exactly where I was sitting when she said that. Okay, that's not verbatim, but that is definitely the sentiment in what she said. And isn't it funny, like, 20 years later, I still remember that. So yeah, be careful what you say to people. You don't know how discouraging or encouraging, on the other hand, you can be. Another quote that was definitely tattooed on my memory came later on when I was doing AS physics. Employers don't really like candidates with a computer science degree. I was actually told this. Okay, again, that's not verbatim, but that's what my physics teacher actually told me. So that, at the time, made me completely discount any consideration of actually taking computer science at university. So anyway, I did finally go off to university. What do you think I might have done? Midwifery. Really, yes. At the time, there was a big recruitment drive. The government was trying to replace a lot of nurses and midwives that were just about to retire. And at the time, you didn't have to take a tuition fee loan to pay your fees. In fact, you got a bursary to live on rather than a maintenance loan. It seemed like a really good deal. And also, it seemed like, it was going to be quite a stable career at the end. So everybody was very encouraging me going into this. So I started training as a midwife. Notice how I didn't complete it. I did 2.5 years of a 3-year course. Didn't really like it. It wasn't really for me. I tried to persevere. But as I was training, I carried on reading web development books on and off. Again, that just happened to be around the house at home. My dad still had his good library. I remember at the time, HTML, for example, hadn't really moved on very much. HTML was still the same as it had been in 1999, 1998. So I remember the books, even though they were quite old, often they weren't that outdated. So I did some freelance writing on the side. I wrote for various magazines. Unfortunately, that industry of magazine writing, because people don't read magazines the same way, seems to have dried up a bit now. But I wrote for magazines such as Prima Baby, for example. So anyway, I dropped out of midwifery. And in between times, I got a job through an agency doing some admin work at Nottingham City Council. And it was very fortuitous that I happened to be put on the telecare team. Does anyone know what telecare is? Telecare is technology to help people stay independent in their own home at home. For example, you've probably seen them, people with the alarms around their neck or on a wristwatch, so if they have a fall, they can call for help. They also had things like fall detectors, alarms for people with dementia that go wandering, gas shut-off valves for people who tend to leave their gas on, these kind of things. So that kind of, again, got me thinking along the lines of maybe a career in technology, because I was seeing a very different aspect of its application. And in fact, it's kind of influenced me in my interest in accessibility, particularly with people with dementia, because as we've got an ageing population, that demographic is just going to grow and grow. I'll click it, go. So yeah, I went off to do a creative writing degree, Bachelor of Arts. I went to art school. I still carried on being interested in interactive media, but fortunately at the university I went to, there was actually plenty of opportunities to learn how to make websites, and I can go and do extracurricular classes in learning this stuff. And I got very involved, and the Master of Creative Writing students, I actually made some portfolio websites for them to showcase their work. So actually when it came down the line to applying for jobs, I had something to show. So again, that was very serendipitous. So this one is verbatim, and I still remember the very shrill tone in which my undergraduate dissertation supervisor told me, "Be careful or you could end up as a developer." And this is a woman I really respected, and because for my dissertation project, the iPad had come out, I remember. So I was doing my dissertation project on the translation of print media into digital. So print magazines into digital magazines, online, on the iPad, etc. So for my dissertation, I made a prototype CMS for a magazine, and one of the student magazines around the university were using it. My undergraduate dissertation supervisor, she saw my interest in this, and she gave me this stark warning not to end up as a developer, because I think she would have found this the most horrifying, terrifying, awful career. And this one utterance put me back, I'd say, 3 years at least, because I remember running off thinking, that must be really awful. I definitely don't want to do that. So we carry on. After university, I got a paid internship in publishing, Random House actually, before it had joined up with Penguin. I wasn't there very long before they realised, I was actually in the digital marketing department, but they realised very quickly, she knows how to make websites. So I ended up basically as a very underpaid front-end developer, making microsites for promotions and things. After working there a while, I did eventually get a job as a junior project manager at an agency. And that's where I realised, actually, I definitely want to be a developer, because I had a good overview of lots of different job roles as a project manager. I saw what everybody was doing, what kind of tasks they were working on, and that's when I realised, yes, actually, this is for me. And then I went off on a career break. I unfortunately became very unwell, and I was unable to work, and I actually went off and didn't work for 3 years. I was on disability benefits. I was very, very sickly in and out of hospital. So yes, so during that time, I was trying to make the most of it. I was sort of doing what I could to learn, hone skills, try and stay up to date. And then when I was ready to get back into the workplace, I was like, goodness me, I've got a Grand Canyon of a hole in my CV. Who is going to want to employ me? So I was looking around. Somebody I went to university with was working at the BBC, not in engineering, in a completely different department. And he asked me, have you thought about applying to the BBC? You know, they've got a lot of engineering. I was sort of like, have they? Because when I thought of BBC, I didn't think of engineering. Actually, the BBC employ about 1,500 software engineers. It's massive. And so BBC, because it's the most diverse and inclusive place I've ever worked at. I was able to apply for a job there, be quite open actually in the recruitment process about what's been going off in my life, and I was able to get in. BBC, there were a lot of women working there, however, this wasn't always the case. This letter from a young woman, she obviously wrote to them on the 15th of September 1969. Her response, "Dear Madam, thank you for your letter of the 15th of September. I regret to inform you that we do not recruit young ladies into technical categories in the engineering division. I am sorry that I cannot be more helpful, but should like to thank you for your interest." And that was the engineering recruitment officer. That's quite shocking, though. Thankfully, it's not like that anymore. And I actually got in at the BBC through a software engineering graduate scheme. And I just wanted to list some of these here because I realise it's a general audience and there might be people here who are looking to get in their first job, looking to career change, etc. The thing about that graduate scheme, which is unusual compared to graduate schemes at many other companies, is that you didn't have to have graduated within 3 years, because by this point I'd definitely graduated more than 3 years ago. And notice what my undergraduate degree was in. It was in creative writing, and they still accepted it anyway, since I'd also done some learning and showed some interest in my own time as well. And there were other traineeships, apprenticeships, and some of them, like I know the data science degree apprenticeship, you know, you get paid to get a degree. Like, it's so rare, no? Something I wish was around when I was trying to brush up and learn and get into the field is Step into Tech. This is for women wanting to move into a career in software engineering, 14-week program. I've looked through, I've just got this off the website. Unfortunately, I don't know anybody who's particularly running this, but it's in London. And the curriculum, to be honest, looks quite good. You can probably get a job as a junior off the back of doing this. So if you go into search for BBC careers, and then once you're on the site, in the search box, search for Step into Tech, I thought I'd flag this up in case people are interested, because I definitely would have been. Okay, also within the BBC, once I was in, I was able to benefit from this YSTEM network. They have monthly meetups over lunch times. It gets guest speakers to come in. Also, they have a mentoring scheme that I've really benefited from. And I've moved around the BBC in a few different departments and got into something I really enjoy, partially thanks to the mentoring I've received. So I feel as a woman working at the BBC now, I feel like it's very different to 1969. I feel very well supported. Okay, now BBC Voice and AI is the name of the department that I work for. We are a new department within the BBC. We're split across 3 sites. We're in London, we're in Salford, and we're in Glasgow. So BBC is working in voice, and so we're looking particularly at developing voice-first formats. We have a voice-first formats team I've been attached with that are looking into innovative ways of creating and delivering voice-first content. Now, the BBC have been making voice-first formats since 1922. You what? You probably know it's the radio. So that is exactly what the main skill, the first skill on the Alexa store did when we launched, is play the radio. I don't know if any of you tried that. I'll come back onto it in a bit anyway. First of all, with this. So I'm going back. So BBC are getting into voice. Voice is disruptive. They took a punt on on this new thing called television in 1936, and decided to take a gamble on it. So again, they're sort of taking a punt on this new thing, voice. They think it's going to be a big thing. We'll yet to see. But it's probably going to be a big thing. First of all, can we just admire this slide? Unfortunately, I didn't do any of this photography, but it's really beautiful. This is representatives of all the big tech giants at the moment. All the big players are investing ridiculous amounts into voice technologies. Everybody seems to be working on a smart companion that you interact with through conversation. This is, I believe, the next great wave in human-computer interaction. I'm actually quite excited by it. And it's taking off. These stats are actually pre-Christmas, so they will have gone up significantly by now. 14%. So before Christmas last year, 14% of UK adults had access to a smart speaker. Once people have one in their home, they're using it a lot. 55% of owners use it daily. And this is, again, before Christmas. It's going to be much bigger now. 3.25 billion voice assistants in use globally. But remember, with that, it's not just smart speakers. Most people will have a smart assistant on their phone, on their tablets, even to control the television. Remember, it's not just smart speakers. I really think that voice interaction, voice interfaces are going to be quite ubiquitous in not that long. Okay, so this is a selfie taken by Giacomo here. This was a team or department away day last year. Unfortunately, I'm not in this photo. I was actually elsewhere speaking at a different conference that day. But this was in Salford last year when the department was around 60 people. There was another away day in November that I did attend in Glasgow, and the department by that point had more than doubled. It was over 120. So this is a department that's really ramped up quite quickly in response to demands and direction that this kind of technology is going in. And we are a multidisciplinary department. Here we've got some of the specialisms of different members of the team. I think that's most people I can think of. I can't think of who else to write at the moment. Oh, like radio producers, we got that there. We've also, video journalists, we've got radio journalists, people writing chatbot conversations, people writing personas, all sorts of things. So it's actually very multidisciplinary, lots of different kind of job roles within the department. Okay, now as I was saying earlier, the main skill was launched end of 2017. It was put out the door quite quickly on the Amazon Echo platform, sort of as a test to see, are people interested in this? Do people want to use it? Actually, it was extremely popular. I haven't got the stats in my head exactly, but we had like over 1 million unique requests really quickly, and I'm sorry I can't quantify really quickly. I don't have the stats at the front of my head, so I don't want to tell you wrong. But for example, I'm going to describe here break down the terminology, and I'm going to use the Amazon Echo ecosystem as an example. But a lot of the terminology I'm going to use, sort of utterance, intent, and slot value, is it's general terminology when it comes to chatbots. It's not unique to Amazon. So if I say, Alexa, open the BBC and play Radio 2. It plays the radio, right? Or it might think for a second, then play. Or what happens in between time? So you have Alexa, which is the wait word. For the Amazon ecosystem, it's either Alexa, Amazon, Echo, or computer. You can pick one. That's the word it's listening out for all the time. As soon as you've said that word, it'll start listening to the rest of the utterance. So it's open the BBC. There's open, ask, and a list of other words. And then the name of the skill, in our case, is the BBC. So what you say gets sent off the recording of what you've asked for gets sent off, in this case, to Amazon. They do speech to text. Then they use some natural language processing to work out, that's the skill we're after. And this is called intent matching. And you can think of an intent as like a function. So you know which function to call based off of what's been asked for. BBC is very unusual in that if you say, Alexa, play BBC Radio 2, without specifying to open the BBC, it will still play. That is called a direct intent. And that is extremely rare for a third-party skill developer to have. But BBC work closely with Amazon, and we've agreed to have some direct intents. So then, once it's been routed through to us, to our skill, we do some intent matching. We have some custom intents that we've written within our skill. So play BBC Radio 2. It'll look up in a big JSON document that we have called an interaction model. And that matches utterances to intents. So this is going to be a custom intent we have. I can't remember if it's called play radio intent or radio play intent, but that's the one we're looking for. So we'll go through to that function. Now we have a thing called a slot value. Now you can think of this as the argument to the function. So we go through to the play radio intent. Which radio station do we need to play? In this case, Radio 2. And then what happens? As far as I'm concerned, it's magic. Because we actually use a lot of other internal APIs to surface content. And as you can see here, this is over 100 software engineers working across all these teams. So we've got analytics, we've got Image Chef that serves up images, because I don't know if you know, when you ask for something on Alexa, you get a card sent back to your app in the Alexa companion app. Also for the, say, Echo Show, you need an image on the screen, because a lot of the smart speakers have visual interfaces. We've got BBC ID for sign-in. We've got media APIs like RMS, that's Radio Music Service, Search Suggest, because we've got just ridiculous numbers of radio on-demand shows. We can't catalogue them all within the interaction model. So something else I just wanted to talk about today, I thought would be interesting for a general audience, would be some of the ethical considerations of developing for a voice user interface. I've put some on here, just sort of some heads up. I'm not going to, with a view to time, I'm not going to go into these in detail, but here are some of the general ideas. Right there. If anyone's really interested, you can email me at the end and I'll send the slides. So I'm just going to move on to something I was really interested to read about recently. This is a UN report that was published about gendered AI. The Equal Skills Coalition chose to look closely at digital assistants because they're widely used globally, rarely examined through a gender lens, and seldom noticed by government agencies and international organisations working to build more gender-equal societies and education systems. And these are basically completely lifted out of the report, and I feel kind of give a good idea of what the report talks about. Particularly in the interest of time, I'd just like to highlight this bottom one. The fact that generally AI voices tend to sound female. Perhaps this sends a signal that women are obliging, docile, and eager to please helpers, reinforcing commonly held gender biases that women are subservient and tolerant of poor treatment. That's something to think about. Is that right or not? Is that going to send a message to future generations or not? I don't know. But I think that's something to definitely important to consider. And if you search online for this UN report by the Equal Skills Coalition, gendered AI, it'll come up. Now, accessibility in voice, something I'd like to quickly talk about before I run out of time here. Within the BBC, every department has different champions working upon them, like we have a security champion, for example. In my team, I'm an accessibility champion, so I go and have extra training now and again about accessibility issues, and I'm always looking out to make sure that accessibility considerations are taken into account when work is broken down, to make sure they're tested for, etc. And as voice UI becomes more prevalent, it's important that nobody is shut out from the content. And I'm surprised by how many people I come across that consider voice as accessible by default, because it doesn't have a screen, right? So it must be accessible. And they're often surprised when I explain, no, it isn't. So I've listed some groups here I'll go through. This is not an exhaustive list, but these are some of the example groups that might have a harder time. Deaf and hard of hearing, that's quite an obvious one. So at the very least, you could, whatever content you have available via voice, make sure it's available in alternative format. Blind and partially sighted, still these devices are actually very reliant on visuals. Even the light ring on top of an Alexa device lets you know that it's listening. You know that it's switched on. If you can't see, yes, you can, in the settings, turn on a chime so you know it's woken up. But how do you know it's dropped out? How do you know it's still thinking? How do you know it's doing something? You're actually still quite dependent on the visual. Neurodiverse people, including those with autism and mental health issues. I know somebody who works at the BBC. He says that he actually really likes voice assistants because he knows when to speak. He says it's something he struggles with when he's having conversations with other people, is when to talk. So he actually counts before he starts talking, so he knows when it's his turn to talk. He really likes the fact that there's lights on these machines, so he knows when it's his turn to talk. Children often can't pronounce words properly yet. Likewise, those with speech difficulties, is the speech text going to work as expected? People with dexterity challenges. Increasingly, these devices are now coming out with a screen on, with a visual interface, and often it's a touch screen, which isn't accessible for everyone. And also, as I mentioned earlier, older people, including those living with dementia. Anyway. If you're interested in that, come and talk to me later. I've got lots to share. Cool. Oops, there you go. You're pleased to hear that's my last slide. That's my email if anyone's interested. I'm Sarah Jessica1 on Twitter if anyone's interested and wants to follow me there. I'm not running off. I've run out of time, so I can't really take questions. I'm sorry. But yeah, thank you for coming.